Purpose of this hearing is to discuss United States competition with China and learn how the administration is working to maintain a strong U.S. presence in the Indo-Pacific. I recognize myself for an opening statement. We stand at a pivotal moment in history where the dynamics of global power are shifting rapidly. The great power competition with China is not just a contest of military might or economic dominance. It is a struggle over the rules which will shape the 21st century and the global balance of power. This is not a future threat or an isolated problem on the other side of the world. The CCP poses immediate danger to the security interest of the United States and our allies. China is working every day to undermine our safety, prosperity, and values of the U.S. Just look at the recent news of an embedded spy in the New York governor's office. They've escalated their military activities, conducted aggressive drills around Taiwan that I've seen firsthand, and increased their belligerence in the South China Sea, particularly against our allies in the Philippines, that our delegation on a recent trip witnessed also firsthand. They are ramming their ships, cutting off sailors' fingers, using high-powered lasers to blind the Philippine Coast Guard. I saw the CCP's Coast Guard and maritime militia presence again when we flew over the South China Sea during a CODEL which I led. Following my visit, China continued to ratchet up their actions against our partners in the Philippines. The CCP's actions are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader strategy to assert dominance in the region, challenging international norms, threatening the sovereignty of neighboring countries. Look no further than the oppression of the CCP's own citizens. The Uyghurs, the Tibetans, we recently visited the Dalai Lama, and Christians live in fear, practicing their religion. In fact, a genocide is still taking place in the Xinjiang province. For Tibetans, the CCP is attempting to insert themselves into the succession of the Dalai Lama. And Chairman Xi's commitment to unify with Taiwan is no longer an idle threat. This is why partnerships such as the Quad, AUKUS, and the Trilateral Partnership with Japan and South Korea are critical to countering China. Specifically with regards to the Quad, we must strengthen ties with India to ensure the two largest democracies in the world are working together to advocate and safeguard democracy. While these partnerships are critical to countering China, I must say I've been disappointed that it has not gone further. The congressionally mandated AUKUS defense trade exemption was delivered 4 months late. The administration still maintains a lengthy excluded technology list that limits its effectiveness. I believe it guts the bill and undermines Congress's intent. These are our closest allies, our Five Eyes partners, with whom we share our most sensitive intelligence. The failure to advance and strengthen these partnerships directly correlates to emboldening the CCP. There is no NATO in the Indo-Pacific, which is why it's imperative we strengthen our partnerships with democracies in the region. However, China's influence extends beyond the Indo-Pacific. The tentacles of the CCP reach every corner of the globe. Their Belt and Road Initiative is a tool for expanding their geopolitical influence, often at the expense of the sovereignty and economic stability of other nations. They have fueled conflicts, such as the war in Ukraine, by supporting Russia's defense industrial base. And Russia, in return, as part of their No Limits partnership, has shared sensitive technology with China. Just the other week, you said Russia is providing China with, quote, submarine operations, activities of aeronautical design, including stealth that also involves capacities on missile capabilities. I don't understand why we don't have sanctions on China to stop them from revitalizing Russia's military. To me, that's absolutely essential. We passed in the supplemental sanctions on Iran, on missiles and drones that are still being shipped to Russia to kill Ukrainians. So as Mr. Meeks and I work on a supplemental to get the funding, to get the weapons, the very instruments of war being shipped from Iran to Russia are not being sanctioned as required by law. I want to thank you, Deputy Secretary. I know we've had a lot of good visits together, and sometimes in other countries. I couldn't agree with you more that countering the CCP must be our top priority. We had a great trip to the Indo-Pacific. I thought the embassy was fantastic in our trip. And on this one, we're not political parties. Mr. Meeks and I want to work with you and this administration on what is in the best interest of the American people. And so with that, I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Deputy Secretary Campbell for appearing before us today. Being a New Yorker myself, anytime we talk about China and talk about the government of the PRC, that's one thing, but I just always want to caution because of the climate we're in our country, that when we're talking about the PRC, we want to also be cautious about what we're saying about all Chinese, particularly the Chinese individuals in the United States of America, so that we are not causing violence and hate crimes against them, because that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about the malign entrance of the PRC. Those are two different things, and to stereotype is difficult. When I've seen individuals in my district who have often mentioned that to me, so I thought it was important for me to mention it opening this hearing today. But to you, Secretary Campbell, you've played a pivotal role in advancing the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. First, as Deputy Assistant to the President, where you served as a coordinator for Indo-Pacific affairs, and now, of course, as the Deputy Secretary. And the Biden-Harris administration has renewed U.S. leadership and engagement and revitalized our alliances and partnership, and nowhere exemplifies this more than in the Indo-Pacific region. In fact, when I went out to the Shangri-La dialogue, it was very apparent there of us and bringing them together, because this kind of effort strengthens the geopolitical guardrails on China. It creates resilience against its coercive policies and strengthens a collective deterrence. And after 3.5 years in office, I can confidentially say that the Biden-Harris administration has made Americans safer and advanced our interests in the Indo-Pacific region. Today, our alliances with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines are stronger than ever. But we are not just working with our partners bilaterally, they are increasingly working with one another and collectively with the United States in several diplomatic arrangements. First, after elevating the Quad to the leaders level upon taking office this weekend, President Biden will be holding the 4th in-person Quad Leaders Summit with leaders of Japan, Australia, and India to continue delivering tangible benefits for the region. Second, the Biden-Harris administration facilitated a trilateral summit with Japan and Korea, an achievement that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. And this bolsters cooperation among these key American allies. And third, the administration's transformative AUKUS security partnership with Australia and the United Kingdom will bolster deterrence, strengthen our defense industrial base, and advance high-tech security cooperation with two of our most trusted allies. Not done yet. Fourth, the Biden-Harris administration has revitalized our ties with the Pacific Islands through the first ever U.S.-Pacific Partnership Strategy and the U.S.-Pacific Islands Country Summit, as well as by extending the Compact of Free Associations for Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. We still have a long way to go, but this web of partnerships is building resilience to the PRC's coercion and creating a coalition to uphold the region that is free, that is open, and that is governed by rules. It means that America is not in this strategic competition alone. Moreover, the administration's diplomacy has opened critical lines of military-to-military communication with Beijing to make conflict in the Indo-Pacific region less likely, something that I know that Secretary Austin has been pushing very, very much. President Biden's decision to engage Beijing from a position of strength has also led Beijing to restore counter-narcotics cooperation, which has the potential to save American lives in the midst of the deadly fentanyl crisis. And just this weekend, we welcomed reports that David Lin, an American citizen who was wrongfully detained in China for nearly 2 decades, is finally home, safe and sound with his family. This is diplomacy at its best. And I'm grateful to the many individuals across our government, including those at the State Department, in the Biden-Harris White House, who continue to work tirelessly to bring every American wrongfully detained overseas home. So, Mr. Secretary, I give the administration immense credit for getting our strategic competition right and understanding that we need to invest at home and in the Indo-Pacific and have that strategy to outcompete China. Last thing I'll say is I would hope that my colleagues here, we will not continue to allow China to outbid us. Cutting the diplomatic budget by 12% does not help us in our competition with China. That is not competing, and so I hope we will do so. So I look forward to our discussion today, and I hope we can talk seriously about how we compete effectively with China instead of just talking in a bluster tone that the stakes are too often. I agree with the chairman. This is something that we focus on in a bipartisan manner. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Gentleman yields. Other members are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We're pleased to have today the 22nd Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell, before us. Your opening statement will be put in the record, and your remarks are at 5 minutes. I now recognize the Deputy Secretary for an opening statement.
Great. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, first of all, let me just say it's an honor and privilege to be before you today. I want to associate myself actually with each of your statements. I appreciate the comments were bipartisan, they are helpful, and frankly, they reflect the partnership that at least I myself have experienced with members of this committee over the course of the last 4 years. And I want to just say I deeply appreciate the engagements that you have had in the region. When Chairman McCall took the team down to Australia and Southeast Asia, we saw immediate movement on areas that matter to us to fulfill our commitments in the Indo-Pacific. And I do want to just underscore, I believe that this is an area of unique bipartisanship, and I'd like to continue it forward. And I will just simply say that some of the most important contributions that we've received have come from this committee, and I want to thank you for that. In particular, what I appreciate is the encouragement, the prodding on AUKUS. It is one of the most important achievements that holds the promise of the United States, Australia, and Great Britain, 3 great nations working together to preserve peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. As the chairman indicates, this is a complex, hard thing. We've not done something like this in 70 years. It needs encouragement and help from you all. I'm going to take that message back. So I'm going to submit my full testimony for the record. You guys can take a look at it. This, I think, comes at an important point as we're heading into an election. It's an inflection point. I want to give you at least my perspectives. I'm now at the State Department, but as the ranking member indicated, I started off at the White House. My job primarily was to ensure that we took the appropriate steps to sustain and to build on our engagement in the Indo-Pacific. And one of the challenges that we've often faced is that we're focused on that issue and then other things draw us away, either domestic issues or challenges in another region. And we see that now with Ukraine and Gaza. But I will say I think we are mindful of the need to sustain and step up our engagement in the Indo-Pacific. So I'm just going to say a couple of things. I appreciate the review of the record. I am proud of a lot of the bilateral engagements, multilateral engagements. I'm going to give you a sense of what I think needs to come next. I'll do that quickly, and then I'm prepared to answer or engage on any issue. Probably the most important thing that we're going to need to do in terms of a national strategy in the Indo-Pacific is to sustain bipartisanship. And I do believe we're on the road to that now. I think there is a recognition that this is the most significant challenge in our history. Frankly, the Cold War pales in comparison to the multifaceted challenges that China presents. It's not just a military challenge, it's across the board. It is in the global south, it is in technology. We need to step up our game across the board. So what we also need to do is build much more capacity both in Congress and inside the U.S. government. I see it every day. And remember, for the last 20 years, we've been intensely focused on the Middle East and South Asia. So a lot of capacity there. Army, land forces, people who understand the Middle East and South Asia. That's still critical, but we need much more capacity in our government in a couple of areas. Language, understanding of the complex politics of the Indo-Pacific, but as importantly, recognizing that the dominant area of competition is in technology. So we need more people in government that know what AI is, that know what quantum computing is, that know how to create incentives for our own industries, but also block some of the critical capabilities from finding their way into the countries that are competing intensively with us. We need to invest more in technology domestically. I want to commend this group and others to understand investing in chips, working with other partners who have technology. That's going to be a critical arena of our national power going forward. We have to continue everywhere with engaging allies and partners. As the chairman indicates, it's go time for AUKUS. I believe we've made remarkable progress with the encouragement of Congress and the Senate as well. We need to be able to take a few more steps going forward. I appreciate the ranking member making clear that the Quad is meeting next week. We're meeting on Saturday. All the leaders are converging. They have a lot of questions about Delaware. We're trying to give them as much as we can. And the president's very much looking forward to showing them, where he's from, all those issues going forward. Really quickly to conclude, we're going to need more shipbuilding. We're going to need to invest more in our naval capabilities. If you think of the last 25 years, it's ground forces, special forces. Increasingly, we now need to focus more on our naval expeditionary capabilities. We need to understand that this is not just a competition in the Indo-Pacific, an arena where we are doing better. It's in the global south as well. And everywhere I go in the global south, I see challenges that we're facing. I will say I'm pleased to tell you that our DFC, you have funded that and supported that, is now competing toe-to-toe with the Chinese programs for investment through the Belt and Road. Lastly, we can talk about the partnerships, all the things that we need to do. As much as anything else, we need to educate the American people about the nature of the challenge ahead. It's not going to ease. It's going to continue. We need more resiliency in our own national institutions and a sense of national resolve for what it takes. I will say, sitting before you, Chairman, I think we're in a better place than we were several years ago. I will just remind you, 4 years ago, the general view globally was that China had eaten our lunch, that they were going to surpass us economically and commercially, that we were in the midst of some sort of hurtling decline. I do not think that is what the general belief is today, and that's largely due to the partnership that I think we've had with folks on this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Campbell. I now recognize myself for questions. One of my big takeaways from the region was how much progress we have made. The alliances between Japan, South Korea, Philippines is extraordinary. Who would think that those countries would be aligned together? It is a counter to China's malign influence. And in many respects, China could be its own worst enemy. With the belligerence against the Philippines, I think President Marcos has gotten even stronger in his rhetoric. And we certainly felt the island nations, as they feel more threatened by China, their perception of China changes. And I think Australia is in that category as well, which is why AUKUS is so important. As you mentioned, this is, if you pulled someone on the street, they wouldn't know what we're talking about. But I think it's one of the most important alliances that we've seen in recent history. The idea that the UK and Australia, the United States, can come together to counter the threat in the Pacific from China is really extraordinary. And it was bipartisan. The intent of Congress, as I stated in my op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, was the exemption to apply to all defense articles except those explicitly prevented by statute or treaty. Now, this excluded technology list came out. So you have ITAR that basically says, look, these international regulations are not going to apply to this partnership. However, the exceptions in the excluded technology list really get the intent of Congress and the bill itself. The current ETL does not reflect, in my view, the intent. Greg Meeks and I had dinner with some high-level DoD officials, the ambassador to China, and others. They too shared the concern about the State Department's interpretation of Pillar 2. Pillar 1, the nuclear submarines, seems to be well on its way. Pillar 2, though, I see in some respects even more important because, as you said, this is a great competition for technology and AI. So when I look at the list of accepted or excluded technologies, when it talks about precision weapons, this one, unmanned underwater vehicles. Well, we got a presentation in Australia of one of the most cutting-edge AI underwater vehicles that could really make a difference. That would be excluded by this technology list that came forward. Communication networks, naval acoustics, and then jet engines. That just being a few. I think that those broad categories of excluded technologies sends I think a really bad message to Australia that we don't trust them, even though we share the crown jewel nuclear submarine and they're Five Eyes, so we share with them our most sensitive intelligence, but we're not going to trust them with co-production. And I think co-production could actually help us with the defense industrial base problem that we have, also. So I kind of get a sense where you are, sir, on this. And I think I have a good understanding where the secretary is. I happen to think that these decisions were made at a lower level, and they were done in a very proprietary, protective way that will damage, again, the intent of Congress. So my takeaway to you, sir, if you take this back to the secretary is raise this to the higher level, the policy level of people that know what the right thing is to do, that know what Congress intended to do, because it's not what came out on this list. That, by the way, it was 4 months delayed. And I think we can get there. We got about 60 days. But I would challenge you and the secretary to work with us, Mr. Meeks, myself, and, with the Department of Defense to get to a better place because, look, in Australia, it's a 20, 50-year commitment. And they see that. And, that's a strong commitment to Australia and to the UK in a common defense against China. If we fail at this one, and I think we've poorly executed the plan that we had, and I can tell you based on intelligence I've seen without getting into classified, AUKUS is probably one of those issues that Chairman Xi is most concerned about and probably is the one that keeps him up at night. And so I want to give you a chance to respond.
So first of all, Chairman, sincerely, I appreciate these comments, and I'm going to take those views back. And it's something I've worked on AUKUS since its inception. I think it's very strategically significant. I will just underscore a couple of things. The natural instincts of our government, rightly, at DoD, at the State Department, is to restrict technologies that have been central to our national security. But you're absolutely right. If we've made this decision to work in the strongest possible partnership with our two closest allies in many respects, Great Britain and Australia, we're going to have to make those adjustments. It will be challenging, but we're going to have to make those adjustments. Now, what I will tell you, just by way of just a quick explanation, those areas that you mentioned, acoustics and stuff, it is not that the folks at lower levels are saying the answer is no. They're saying we have to review each case as it comes to us. It doesn't mean that they'll reject it, but I think what our Australian friends are primarily concerned with, Chairman, is that that could lead to a very cumbersome process, long reviews, overruns in terms of times and delivery. And so we need to make this usable for defense planners and others that are making billion-dollar investments. And so I think the point that you're underscoring is critically important. Your op-ed, your letters, what you have done in conjunction with the ranking member have actually helped us to be able to make sure that we are doing the right thing in our government to acknowledge this partnership. Just one last thing I would say. So Pillar 1 is the part that's about the submarines. Pillar 2 doesn't get enough attention, and that's really about not just, we have 3 countries engaged in that now, but looking at advanced technologies, capabilities that are innovative, perhaps not as expensive. And you're exactly right. If you look behind the scenes, both Great Britain and Australia have made investments in innovative capabilities that would be very good for us. So we need to break through and work on those issues together. Sorry to go over.
And I think AI, land, air, and sea will be critically important. I would ask you engage with us in the committee on this. We don't want to see some product come out of the, lower levels of the State Department that we've been, secluded from in darkness, or that we have no idea what's going on, when it's going to come out, what's going to be in it. And I think you're the perfect person to engage with this committee on the next 60 days, how we can work together to carry out the intent of Congress in passing this important legislation.
I completely, wholeheartedly accept that challenge, and I will make it so. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, let me just, there's certain things that are really, important to me. We don't have a NATO in the Indo-Pacific, but seeing how we're bringing people together, even to see when I was at the Shangri-La Dialogue, how Europeans were also present, working together. So that became tremendously important to me to show that we are bringing it together, because once upon a time, when I was into the Europeans, they said, oh, you don't care about us because you're pivoting to the East. And when I went to Indo-Pacific, they said, oh, you don't care about us because all you care about is the West. I'm now trying to see where they're talking and understand how it is important to both that we figure out how to work together. So to that, what does concern me is the PRC's continued support for Russia's war. It seems as though that, and I'd like you to tell us whether, China's contributing lethal, non-dual use materials to Russia's war effort. Is that correct? From what you see? And so what are we doing? What is the State Department doing to deter Beijing from providing these lethal support to Russia to hold, and how do you see us holding Beijing accountable for doing so?
Ranking Member, thank you for the question. First, let me just underscore, I do believe that helping construct this lattice work of alliances and partnerships, which include not just our formal treaty allies, but others. I would underscore, this is a point that the chairman mentioned, we need to make sure that partnership with India is significant, maybe our most important going into the 21st century. We're committed, I think, in a bipartisan sense to do that. You're also exactly right. One of the most interesting things that is occurring is European partners are working with us in the Indo-Pacific, and, as you note, Indo-Pacific partners are supporting Ukraine substantially in their efforts to resist the brutal invasion and illegal invasion of Russia. So you mentioned a point that I'm deeply concerned by, and that is China's support to Russia's defense industrial base. But it is not just China that is doing it. It is also support from North Korea to Russia in terms of artillery rounds and missiles, and more recent reports of Iran supporting Russia. So now you have these other countries that are engaging and supporting Russia in an effort that, frankly, poses not just a challenge to Ukraine, but long-term peace and stability in Europe going forward. I would simply say, I think the most important thing, the reason that I'm spending so much time in Europe, we frankly have taken a lot of sanctions against Chinese firms. We've sent signals about our concern about the financing of these deals between Chinese, secondary technology firms and their Russian partners. The challenge is we've got to get more support from Europe on this. And there is a growing recognition of what China is doing in Russia. But you need to understand, for many of these countries, they faced a huge shock with the energy being shut off from Russia. Most of these countries made a bad bet on sort of that Russia would be a reliable provider of energy. And for many of these countries, doing business with China has been a big deal for 15 or 20 years. And so the idea to be kind of a 1-2 punch, you can understand leaders in Europe have some anxieties. However, I will simply say what we are seeing between China and Russia has the potential to destabilize Europe over the medium term and long term. And we have to be resolute about this. And I will say this is a relationship, guys, China and Russia, that we, the United States, has always had problems with. We did not understand the Sino-Soviet split in the 60s and 70s. We were late to understand it. And frankly, I think we have been slow to recognize the absolute intensity of engagement between President Putin and President Xi. So I want to associate myself with the sense of the committee that this is something that we need to do more on. In truth, it is affecting the battlefield in Ukraine, but as importantly, it will affect the longer-term relationship between Russia and the other countries in Europe as well.
And that's what I'm thinking about also, because when I think about the Indo-Pacific and what we're doing here in the United States, could you just tell us how do you think it's important, or how important is it for our resolve here in the United States to support Ukraine for bolstering? How does that have a way it helps bolstering deterrence in the Indo-Pacific? And whether or not, if we fail in Ukraine, will there be any lessons that that Beijing will take away as a result of or the lack of our resolve in Ukraine?
So it's a great question. I would just have the committee note in the last couple of days what we've seen is one of the largest exercises between Russia and China in the Indo-Pacific. We're continuing to see them working closely together in a variety of areas, not just in Ukraine, but increasingly across the Taiwan Strait. And so, look, there are academics and think tankers who say, oh, no, we gotta not focus as much on Ukraine. We gotta focus more on what's going on in the cross strait. My counsel to you is that you cannot separate these things. How we fare on the battlefield in Ukraine, how the Ukrainians do, has incredible implications for how others think about potential areas of conflict in the Indo-Pacific. And I will say what's happening in Ukraine on the battlefield is leading militaries around the globe, but particularly in the Indo-Pacific, to think about their own procurement and their own strategies. I'm pleased to say I know that the chairman and you had dinner last night with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. They are deeply focused on learning the lessons ourselves so we can apply it to new potential avenues of deterrence in the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Secretary Campbell, thank you for being here today. Last week, during the House's, I'll call it China Week, We passed numerous Foreign Affairs Committee bills to position the United States to better compete with China and win. I am happy to say that the House unanimously passed my legislation, the Export Control Enforcement and Enhancement Act, to ensure that state, defense, energy, and other national security agencies can play a stronger role in curating the entity list, while also setting a 30-day clock to make sure that proposals to change the entity list do not languish in red tape. Deputy Secretary Campbell, can you tell us how Chinese companies exploit loopholes in our export control system to maintain access to cutting-edge U.S. tech, and how is the administration taking action to stop this behavior?
So first of all, it's a great question. It's an important question. You know, the recognition is this: 5-7 years ago, there were probably no two countries more intertwined, interconnected than the United States and China. Now we're in a situation where I think we recognize, exactly as your bill suggests, that there are areas in technology in particular where we want to be much more restrictive, and we want to be careful, because those engagements in, you know, AI chips, in a variety of capacity, semiconductor.
It's our technology, and the loopholes are, you can ride, drive trucks through them. And I hope that this bill that puts a 30-day clock will become law. But in the meantime, we have got to act to stop them from stealing our technology.
So look, I would simply say I completely agree that technology is our high ground. The biggest challenge that we faced over the last 25 years is not Chinese espionage. It is very significant. We have not had a very good technology strategy. We have exported a lot of things. We have not understood that these are national capabilities that we need to invest in.
Well, it is. Now, switching tracks, sir, during the Biden administration, Taiwan has lost 4 diplomatic allies. The People's Liberation Army violations of Taiwan's air defense identification zones have increased over 1,000%, and the Chinese military is conducting military exercises in new areas around Taiwan. Chinese coercion of Taiwan is clearly ramping up, and it will only escalate from here unless the U.S. and its allies stand up to China. China's coercion techniques may fall short of a full-scale attack on Taiwan, sir, but they are exceptionally dangerous. If China can bring Taiwan to its knees using a sustained coercion campaign instead of costly invasion, it will. And it seems to me that the U.S. has no plan to deter such a campaign. What is the Biden administration's strategy to deter Chinese coercion against Taiwan, and what metrics are you using to measure success?
Thanks for your question. I've worked on the maintenance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits for most of my career, almost 35 years. I do want to say it is a great achievement of American foreign policy, bipartisan commitment. For 50 years, we've seen democracy thrive.
I don't have much time, sir, and I want to try and stick to the clock, unlike others. And can we? So, what are you doing about
So first of all,
to deter coercion against Taiwan, and the metrics that you're using to measure success?
So I would simply say we believe that the guiding document of our engagement is the Taiwan Relations Act, passed in '79. It mandates us to have the capabilities in the Western Pacific, which we do, to resist aggression. We've provided enormous amount of capacity to allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. Huge amount of deterrence is not just what the United States does alone, but with other countries. And
you recognize their sustained coercion campaign and what they're doing.
Of course.
It will bring Taiwan to their knees without an invasion. We must do something.
Yeah. So first of all, I believe Taiwan is a highly resilient. They just had one of the most successful elections in their history. By the way, much more successful than ours more recently. I do believe they recognize that many countries stand with them. 10 years ago, when something would go wrong, it would only be the United States that speaks out.
Thank you very much. My time's expired. I will submit the rest of my questions for the record. And, I think we need more more answers than we need word salad. Thank you.
His time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Sherman.
Thank you. China gives incentives to its people to invest in Chinese stocks, but they don't give those incentives to invest in American stocks. That makes perfect sense. The United States incentivizes investment through the capital gains allowance. We provide that at a cost of billions of dollars to our Treasury to those who invest in Chinese stocks. So I would point out to my colleagues that if you think we should stop subsidizing investments in Chinese stock, you'll want to join me on the bill that I've had on that issue. But I'll ask our witness, would it be disastrous for American foreign policy if we stop spending billions of dollars to encourage American billionaires to invest in Chinese stocks? That's a yes/no question, I think.
So, Congressman, I would simply say the investment law and
But from the foreign policy standpoint, would it be a disaster if we stopped subsidizing these investments?
I'd answer it this way. I do believe a huge part of our national strategy should be the restriction of certain kinds of investments or technologies in areas that are antithetical to our strategic interests.
The State Department won't give a visa to a Taiwanese high government official to come here to the Washington, D.C. area. But during COVID, we learned that we can have hearings with our witnesses appearing virtually. And of course, foreign officials, we don't have hearings, we have briefings. Would the State Department object if this committee had a briefing by Zoom with the Foreign Minister of Taiwan?
First of all, I can't make decisions for the committee more generally.
I'm asking whether you would advise against it.
We have deep, substantial engagements, unofficial and other engagements with the Taiwanese government. I believe that you do as well.
And I'm hoping that the chair would have a briefing of this committee by the Foreign Minister of Taiwan. Our policy toward North Korea for this whole century has been a manifest failure in that they keep making more fissile materials and we keep telling them they don't have nuclear weapons or they shouldn't. I think we should be changing our bargaining position. We changed our style radically with Trump, but not our position. But I want to focus on a much smaller issue. And that is a bill that I have with substantial support in Congress urging you to do something you should do anyway that has majority support in the South Korean parliament. And that is to announce a willingness to negotiate a peace treaty with North Korea to replace the armistice that Eisenhower signed. This is not a concession to them any more than Eisenhower's policy. Is the United States willing to negotiate a peace treaty formally ending the War of 1953?
So first of all, I will just say diplomatically, we're prepared to sit down and engage with the North Koreans. We do have some conditions. We will not accept North Korea as a nuclear state.
Are we willing to negotiate on this one issue only after they give up their nuclear weapons, or are we willing to negotiate to solve the problems of 1953?
I will tell you, all of our engagements are attempts. We wanted to help to assist during COVID. We wanted to open the door for certain. I'll just let one thing. For the last 6 years, we've had virtually no communication with North Korea. They have chosen not to engage with us directly on any subject.
I would hope that we would announce that we are willing to negotiate on this one subject. Dr. Afridi remains in prison in Pakistan. We should have agreed to a Siddiqui-Afridi trade. We didn't. I don't know if that's still on the table. But let us not regard the killing of Osama bin Laden as a complete success when the man who was critical to that remains in jail. As to Pakistan, they banned the batsman. Imran Khan is in jail. They're proposing changes to their constitution that would make Viktor Orban blush in the sense of changing the independence of the judiciary and perhaps bringing Imran Khan before a military court. I would urge you to instruct the U.S. ambassador in Islamabad to simply visit Imran Khan in prison and demonstrate that we meet with various Pakistani leaders at all times, and we're willing to meet with him.
I've got both those issues. Thank you. I'll take those both back. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Mast.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to stick with China's support for Russia's industrial base, something that you spoke a little bit about, but I think you spoke about it from 30,000 feet. I'd like to drill down on it a little bit more and move into something that you said as well, which is that we are sending signals about this. So let's start with, more specifically, what is the most worrying, the most problematic support of Russia's industrial base that you're seeing out of China?
I would say for me, Congressman, the most worrisome thing is that it comes from the very top. And it appears that the Russians are prepared to provide a broad range of support for their military industrial capacity in Russia. I think right now we see the role of UAVs and other capacities that are penetrating the Ukrainian airspace. Much of that has been supported surreptitiously by China, and it raises real concerns.
Give me more specifics. Ordnance related,
Well,
electronics related, technology related.
chips, some design features, some capacities associated with the making of explosives. I think in this session, I can't go very much further. In a private session, which I would happy to have any time I'll give you. But I would just say, Congressman, it is substantial and it is affecting Russian capabilities on the battlefield.
What are the signals that we are sending that are, by the way you said it, I take them as inadequate?
Say, as
Signals. You mentioned in your comments, we are sending signals.
well, so we've done dozens and dozens of sanctions against particular Chinese firms. We have put some of their financial institutions on watch. We have worked closely with international financial institutions to signal our concerns about the financing of the deals. These are hard to get at. Sometimes that financing is below SWIFT sanctions that major financial institutions are
The way you
involved.
said signals, when you first said it, and I would take it in the way you said it just now as well, to me it seemed as though you were indicating it was inadequate. Where would you like to see those signals move from and to?
So, look, I've just told our Assistant Secretary is going to brief later today in classified session. I'm going to ask him to go through this. I will say it features in every diplomatic engagement we have. So I got back from Europe last week, met with NATO. We are working closely with partners to share as much information as possible with them. Every meeting we have with the Chinese, this is our number one issue.
So we'll continue that portion of the conversation. We'll
Yeah.
continue that portion of it in the classified briefing. Happy to do that at that point. Let me move to a different entity, same conversation. What, if anything, can you point to as far as effective posturing or policy out of the WTO to help deal with this?
I don't think this would be
Or
considered.
are they an effective entity to deal
They're
with it at all?
not the WTO, Congressman, is effective in things like overcapacity. So we're deeply engaged with the WTO about China's attempts to dump electric vehicles in the United States. The specific technologies and things that are taking place, sort of the dual use and other directed capabilities, frankly, have to be undertaken more in channels with allies and partners like NATO.
So when you're in a situation of all hands on deck, it's exactly what that sounds like. Do you think there is a role that WTO could play more substantially to be a better ally in this, to be a better assistance as the entity that they are?
I mean, I hear you. I think we have briefed the WTO. My own sense, Congressman, is that it will prove unwieldy and that there are a number of states in the WTO that would not share with this assessment. It might be hard to move them. They are a majority action
What
grouping.
states would you be most concerned about?
There are a few states in Europe, I think we both know what they are, that probably associate more with Russia and Ukraine, like Russia and China, like Hungary. That would be of concern. I will say, I believe this is an arena where we are best suited to work with our strong allies and partners. That's why we're working with Japan and Australia, Ukraine, all of our countries in Europe who are also taking like-minded steps to send, I think, probably the clearest possible signals that these steps by China and Russia have the potential not just to upset the battlefield, that's happening, but longer-term security in Europe.
Thank you, and my time has expired.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Deputy Secretary. Would you say that Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping are malign influences with respect to U.S. foreign policy and our interest in the Indo-Pacific region?
So I would say clearly Kim Jong-un is undertaking deeply malign steps against American strategic interests, against our closest partners in Japan and South Korea. And I do not believe there are any redeeming features about their role on the global stage. I think you know that our relationship with China is much more complicated.
Well, let me stick with that Korea one. So do you know who President Trump was talking about in 2019 when he said, quote, "He has a great and beautiful vision for his country, and only the United States, with me as president, can make that vision come true." You know who President Trump was talking about?
I think it was Kim Jong-un, but
Kim
I don't
Jong-un,
know
you
that.
just said no redeeming quality. Okay, well, who was President Trump? Because certainly Xi Jinping, it's complex, I'll grant you. But certainly his activities in the South China Sea and in the region more broadly have been aggressive and at times kinetic, provoking our allies and forcing us to respond. Is that not true?
It is true.
So who was President Trump talking about when he said, and I quote, and this is just last year, "Think of him, central casting, brilliant guy. You know, when I say he's brilliant, everyone says, oh, that's terrible. But, well, he runs with an iron fist. He's smart, brilliant, and everything perfect." Who is he talking about? Do you know?
I think that's President Xi Jinping.
See, you're winning. Xi Jinping. Some of my friends in the other side of the aisle love to bash the Biden administration for somehow being asleep at the wheel in this region. So let me just walk through a few things. Did President Biden and this administration bring together two long, if not adversaries, certainly suspicious of one another for historical reasons and getting cooperation really tough, and forge a bilateral cooperation agreement between Japan and Korea? Did that happen in our watch?
Trilateral, yes.
Yeah,
and I
you.
will say I saw personally President Biden's engagement with both leaders, pushing them to do things that were frankly a little bit out of their comfort zone and difficult for them politically.
Yep.
Ultimately, the leadership
Big
is
deal.
with President Yoon
Right.
and Prime Minister Kishida, but President Biden very much helped.
Big deal, because they don't really trust one another, but a common foe and a common interest led by the Biden administration brought them together in the trilateral. And by the way, we passed a resolution on the floor of the House unanimously praising that agreement just last week. Australia and the United Kingdom, did the Biden administration pull together something called AUKUS to co-develop modern technology and increase the capacity of our partners in the Indo-Pacific region?
I thought we did, but I heard maybe it had come about earlier, but I don't think so. I think this was the Biden administration.
Did the Biden administration revive the relationship with the Philippines such that we actually now have been invited back to open 4 military bases, as I'm counting, in the Philippines, again designed to counter Chinese aggression and hopefully serve as a deterrent?
Yeah, very proud.
And how long did we go without military bases in the Philippines before the Biden administration reached that agreement?
It's been decades since we've
Decades.
worked more
So
this closely
again,
with the
reviving a relationship. We also have a quadrilateral security dialogue called the Quad, which is working with Japan, India, and Australia to promote rules-based order. Is that true?
It is true.
And have we kind of revivified that and poured new energy into that, especially given the concern about Chinese aggression in the region?
Yeah, we've taken it to the leader level in unprecedented ways, yes.
And did the Biden administration bolster an unlikely partnership with a country with which we were at war not that long ago, Vietnam.
Indeed, yes.
And again, was that fostered by concern about the aggressive posture of Xi Jinping in China?
Yes, but also the fact that Vietnam deeply wants a better, more constructive relationship with the United States as well.
And is it true that the Biden administration led the first ever U.S. Pacific Islands Country Summit and renewed the compacts of free association for the Pacific Islands?
Yeah. This is like the greatest hits. I like this. But
Yeah.
yes, these are the things that
I thought
we've
you'd
been
enjoy
involved-
it.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
feel better than I thought.
I
yeah.
just think, it's easy to sit back and throw, pot shots at an administration. This administration has not been asleep at the wheel. This administration has actually been very aggressive in countering Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and in the Indo-Pacific region, and has sought out and turned around relationships in the region to partner with to meet that threat. And I hope China has taken notice, and that's my last question because my time's up. But and by the way, Mr. Chairman, I just want to go on the record as disagreeing with Ambassador Wagner. I think your extra time enlightened us all, and I thank you. But
So I
what
would
do you
s-
think? Has China taken note of all of this action, and has it made a difference? And then I'll yield back.
They have. I would also just underscore that I believe many of these issues, frankly, are bipartisan as well. And they have benefited from the support of Republicans and Democrats. In many respects, the emerging consensus on the Indo-Pacific, I think, is strong. And I believe that there's a clear path for what issues that we need to do going forward. The things that you point out, the only one I would add to that is the engagement with India. It has been the engagement with India. It has been deeply consequential, and the fact that we have a stronger partnership with India today than ever before is also significant. And yes, they are taking note in Beijing.
I thank the chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. I think it's very enlightening. I thank you, Mr.
Well,
Deputy
thank you
Secretary.
for your partisan contribution to the hearing. I've been I actually praised the Quad, praised the trilateral agreement, and I praised AUKUS, which I authored myself. But thanks for turning this into a partisan exercise. I recognize Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Sir, do you believe that the Chinese Communist Party is fully aware of the fentanyl that is coming from China?
I think China's an enormous country, huge numbers of firms. I think they have a general understanding of the fentanyl problem, both in the United States, but also globally. The synthetic drugs are a bigger problem now in China, in Southeast Asia, in the United States, Latin America.
Well, are they doing anything to stop it?
Yeah, they've taken some steps. It's not enough, but they've taken some steps, yes.
What would those steps be?
They've outlawed some firms. They've taken a few people to court. They have issued restrictions. The reason that they have done that largely is the engagement of this committee and others directly with China.
Yes,
and
sir.
so they recognize that there is a deep bipartisan anxiety about it in the United States.
It seemed to me, though, if they knew that if they were really against it, they would stop it. I mean, they have a totalitarian government. I appreciate that, saying they're going to court. But Xi Jinping says stop it, then it's, you have these guys committing suicide by shooting themselves 12 times in the back of the head. That's generally what happens. And I don't see that happening. Their Navy now outnumbers our Navy in terms of total number of warships. Do you think that makes the Chinese a more powerful Navy or a more effective Navy?
Yes, I still think we have the finest Navy in the world, but we've got to get on our horse and do much better on shipbuilding. Yes, that is absolutely correct.
I worry about that because, my father's war, Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, and then 6 months later we roll out across the Pacific and take the world back, more or less. And I don't see that being the apparatus today. I mean, I see it. It's more automated. We have long-range missiles. We have things that are. I feel like this is. I realize the war machine and powerful congressmen and senators' districts build those ships and the components of that. and I worry about that having too much influence. Do you think that war in Taiwan is inevitable?
Not if the United States and allies have a resolute posture of deterrence.
Do you think that if Russia's unable to access components for weapons from China, what do you think that war looks like in Ukraine?
I think if China starts to hesitate in certain engagements with the military-industrial capacity of Russia, I think it will limit some of their capabilities. You know, Congressman, it's hard to know completely exactly impacts, but it would be significant. Can I just go back just to one point you made? I just want to associate myself. We spent 25 years really investing in ground forces, a lot of capability. This is a naval time. This is an expeditionary time. The Navy has to step up. We have to step up with them. We got to figure out how to be much more capable in and faster in shipbuilding and design. It is the most important thing that we need to do over the course of the next 10 years. And I will say, I'm grateful to this committee. AUKUS is an important step. Our submarine force is the jewel in the crown. We have to do more there. We got to get our submarines out of dry dock more quickly, but we need more capital ships arriving into the fleet much more quickly, and we have to have more global capacity in the Indo-Pacific.
What's the detriment to that? What is slowing that
So
down?
we got 5 minutes each question. I can't give you all the answers, which are so difficult. There are many issues. We don't have enough skilled work people. We have contracts are difficult. I could take you through it. We could do it over a longer period. But what I would say is that this just needs to be an area of increased national purpose.
Okay, one more question. Are there any sanctions not being enforced that could interfere with the weapons production and trade between China and Russia?
I don't think I understood the question completely. Just say it one more time. Sorry.
Are there
Congressman.
any sanctions? I'm from East Tennessee, sir. It's the only place in America where people don't speak with an accent. So,
Okay.
are there any sanctions not being enforced that could interfere with the weapons production and trade between China and Russia?
I believe that almost all the sanctions that have been applied to China in this respect have been followed. I think probably more steps are going to be necessary going forward.
All right. Thank you, Chair Lady. I yield back my 12 seconds.
Thank you. I now recognize Congressman Barra from California.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Connolly went through the greatest hits, so I won't repeat that. But I would emphasize, something that the ranking member raised. The marriage of a transatlantic strategy with the Indo-Pacific strategy, I think, is one that we're really seeing advancing in conversations. I'm going to shift. I know you represented us at the Pacific Islands Forum meeting, and in the past few months have traveled a lot in the Pacific Islands. I've been to Tonga, Tuvalu, the Solomon Islands, PNG, and Fiji, and also prior to that spent some time in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand, kind of looking at the Mekong. Mr. Burgett touched on some of the drug trafficking and fentanyl issue. And one item I did not expect to come up when I was in Tonga, when I asked what's one of the biggest things that we could help you with, was actually drug trafficking. And again, it's some of what the cartels are doing in terms of fentanyl flowing, not so much to the islands, but on their path to Australia, New Zealand, et cetera. And that's, would love to get your perspective on that. I've raised the issue with the Australians, and I think this is an area where we could all work together. Also along the Mekong, did not expect to hear about some of these exclusive economic zones that really are just Chinese organized crime setting up casinos, indentured servant, but also I do think a lot of drug trafficking moving through there as well. And again, if you want to touch on that, how we should be thinking about that as Congress working with the administration, not a partisan issue. It's an issue of concern. And then any other takeaways from the Pacific Islands Forum?
First, can I just also thank you personally for the time that you have given me, the opportunities to sit down, and the engagement that you've helped with, not just the Indo-Pacific, but also India and elsewhere. So just a sincere thank you more directly. You're exactly right. If you travel through the Pacific, the issue that they're most worried about right now, they're worried about illegal fishing, they're worried about climate change, but the increase in shipments through these islands of precursor capabilities, not just for fentanyl, but other kinds of synthetic drugs, is a source of deep concern. So I was there a week and a half ago. We have now immediately, I hope, gone into action to begin law enforcement cooperation with a variety of states with a particular focus on drug enforcement. So I thank you for that. I would appreciate your encouragement more. Our challenge here, folks, is resources. Like, we're trying to do more with less. We're going to need more help in the Pacific. These countries vote with us. They are aligned with us. They want more from us. I must say I'm concerned that we, frankly, neglected them for decades. Now we've got to do more. A little bit more support in this arena will go a long, long way. I also want to acknowledge your commitment to the Mekong. We do have an initiative on the lower Mekong. I will say I'm deeply concerned by some of the recent developments. I take what you're saying about the issues about these free zones, which you see in Laos and Cambodia, which even cause concerns in local governments. But what I'm also worried about, the Mekong is one of the great rivers of the world. The actions that have been taken upstream with very little input from Vietnam, from Cambodia and Laos have caused real problems for local communities in terms of agriculture and fishing and the like. And so I'm proud of the work that we've done to try to elevate and highlight the important work on the Mekong, and I thank you as well for your work on this.
Well, I look forward to working with you on both those issues. Earlier this Congress, the chairwoman and I held a hearing on the Indian Ocean region.
Yes.
And it's an area where I don't think we pay as much attention, but we do see what the PRC is doing, whether it's Djibouti, whether it's in the UAE, Pakistan, et cetera.
Can I just report on one thing, again, through your encouragement? We haven't really announced this yet, but I can tell you this. For the first time, the United States and India and others are going to hold a session on the Indian Ocean. And we're going to talk about what our mutual concerns are, how we can work together. You're absolutely right. There are a variety of reasons why, because it kind of falls between the cracks of all these commands. But the Secretary Austin, has asked Admiral Paparo to help sort of kind of fuse together our national military approach, security approach. We're going to work with them, White House, DOD, State Department. This is the new frontier, working more closely with a partner like India in the Indian Ocean.
Great. No, this committee wants to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Barr from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Deputy Secretary Campbell, good to see you again.
see you.
And I literally just came from a meeting with TECRO and the Taiwan United Nations Alliance group, and Dr. Michael Tsai, former Minister of Defense, says to say hello to you and appreciated the relationship you all have had over the years. What was discussed in that meeting was Resolution 2758, the UN General Assembly resolution from the 70s. Can you clarify the U.S. position on China using it to claim that Taiwan is part of China, when, in fact, while it does address Chiang Kai-shek, it's silent on Taiwan's status?
Yeah, exactly. And it is a tool that China has used, as you rightly point out, Congressman, in its diplomacy to make the argument that somehow Taiwan's status is illegitimate, or that interpretation of a one China principle leaves them at a disadvantage. I simply want to say that, we stand by our commitments to Taiwan. We try to clarify in all of our engagements the nature of our policy towards Taiwan, how it is influenced by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 6 assurances, the 3 communiques. I will say, Congressman, that framework, it is difficult and challenging sometimes, but it has provided for an unprecedented level of development and peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait for 40 years. It's going to be harder going forward, but I do think it has given us the capacity and the framework to engage on a complex
Well, thank
issue.
you for that, because I think the less ambiguity
Yeah.
relating to that and the U.S. position, the better, because obviously, as you just pointed out, the PRC is using that to sever diplomatic ties or disrupt diplomatic ties between certain nations, and also exclude Taiwan and Taiwan, and then exclude Taiwan from international participation in international organizations. Let me ask you about sanctions really quickly in Europe. I'm leading a bipartisan congressional delegation to Europe, and I seek your guidance here, but one of the ways to enlist European allies and partners into this project relating to China and making sure there's de-risking happening with respect to China, in my view, is better, more forceful use of sanctions. In August, the administration, Commerce, added 30 Chinese firms to the Commerce Entity List for their role in supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But were any of these companies added to the Treasury CMIC list?
I'm going to have to take the specifics of that back, Congressman, and I will get back to you immediately on this. I do want to I think what you describe is what's necessary between the United States and Europe. The first step is more engagement on the Indo-Pacific. You will find on your trip, when you talk to them about the Indo-Pacific, they're hungry for more information. They want to know more about our policies, but this is not an arena where they have a lot of deep experience. And so your ability to help them think through the challenges, they want to know more about cross-straits. They ask us a lot of questions about the South China Sea. They want to know about AUKUS and our security partnership.
Well, can I just reclaim real quick? Because I think, again, getting the Europeans serious about this issue would be if we actually not just put these Chinese entities on a commerce list, but actually sanction them or put them on the CMIC list, because that has a multilateral effect. The Europeans are looking at what Treasury is doing, and if these Chinese entities are aiding Russia enough to get on the entity list of commerce, why are they not being put on the Treasury CMIC list? And then furthermore, why is Treasury not putting them on the full blocking sanctions list, the SDN list?
I'll take that back.
Yeah, and I need to talk to Secretary Yellen about this too. We're not sending the right signals to the Europeans. If we sanction these entities for materially supporting Russia, then Europe will pay more attention. And I think that's what I would, you can help us in our diplomacy in Europe if Treasury would actually do this, as opposed to just putting it on a commerce list. Final question on the Philippines. Are the resupply trips to the Sierra Madre a long-term solution to assert the Philippines' internationally recognized sovereignty over Second Thomas Shoal? What is the long-term solution to Second Thomas Shoal?
So I think the most important things that we can do right now, Congressman, is, as we've heard, strengthen the bilateral partnership between the United States and the Philippines, to multilateralize. You'll note in recent weeks we've had patrols from Australia, from Japan, other countries, to underscore our commitment to freedom of navigation. We have to increase Philippines' capacity, and we have to be absolutely resolute that the legal standing on which China is using to apply illegitimate force in these areas is antithetical to the international community.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlelady from California, Representative Jacobs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Secretary, great to see you. Thanks for being here. I first wanted to ask you about the Global Fragility Act. I think it's an incredibly important bipartisan piece of legislation. My colleague, John James, and I introduced the reauthorization of it today. And thank you for being such a steadfast champion of it within the department. I asked Undersecretary Bass the same question last week, and I want to get your answer to it, which is, as you know, the way we envision the Global Fragility Act is that it's not just a programming authority. It's about a whole new way of doing business, learning from the lessons of the Sahel and Iraq and Afghanistan, including the need to have an integrated response with the State Department in the lead, because at the end of the day, these are not actually only security challenges, they're political ones. And it's not only a programming thing, we need to have it infused in all of our diplomacy. So I wanted to ask you, how are you in the department doing diplomacy differently and pushing for political solutions pursuant to the GFA, and how are you making sure that the GFA strategies and the idea of GFA are infused and integrated into all policy decisions?
Yeah. So look, it's been a great policy tool. What it has helped us with the most, to be honest, is that it's helped forge more collaboration with key players inside the U.S. government. And in truth, what we've sought to do in addition is to bring other partners in, like I was talking about the DFC, the Coast Guard. And so what I think it has provided us is a way of thinking about challenges that allows us to motivate and to engage a whole of government on some of our issues that we're dealing with. So Congressman Bear, just really to give you an example, was talking about the drug issues. The drug issues can't be solved by our Navy patrols or our diplomatic engagement, but we have really good capacities on how to counter societies or groups that are being afflicted with drug flows. And so it's bringing those groups into the conversation and engaging them directly. So I like the tool very much. I've used it primarily in a couple of different countries. I'd like to see that framework extended to other countries, particularly in the global south, where we need to step up our game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I actually wanted to get to one of the specific countries since we're talking about the Indo-Pacific today. Obviously, Papua New Guinea is one of the GFA priority countries.
Yes.
I visited there a couple years ago, and I think it's a good case study to figure out how GFA is a way we can do things different, even amidst global competition. But I wanted to know, how are you thinking about the challenge of, like, through GFA, and in general, we're offering more technical assistance to the judicial capacity and, reducing violence, whereas, China's offering to build roads. How are you thinking about the value proposition of the Global Fragility Act as it relates to Papua New Guinea?
So thanks. And so I would simply say that the Global Fragility Act is important, but not the totality of what we need to be able to do. So in truth, you are right. You've traveled in the Pacific, so you go to these countries. We help with a lot of soft power issues on treatment of disease, on education, on capacity building, and they build a big stadium or a big, head of government office, and it's quite visible and hard to compete with in some respects. I will say in the last year or two, we have found a couple of areas that have been a big differentiator for us, and something, again, the committee has been briefed on and supported. Our support to these countries being linked by undersea cable. The Pacific is the most vulnerable to storm surges. They have the most unpredictable, frankly, not very good internet, which connects them to the larger world. These undersea connections give them the ability to connect in a durable way. It is going to be game-changing for being able to survive storms, to be able to be connected to the global business community, education alike, and that's really American and partner innovation at work. And so I just want to say we are going to have to do more with respect to building, judiciaries and the like, but nothing's going to substitute for some real work in the infrastructure of these vulnerable nations.
Well, thank you, and thanks too for your emphasis in making sure we're providing support and partnership to the Global South and not just making them pawns in this game of competition.
I will say also, and I very much, Congresswoman, the way you said this, when you go into these meetings, wherever you are, in Africa or in the Indo-Pacific, if they believe the only reason that we're engaging is to compete with China, our partners are immediately suspicious. We have to meet these countries where they live, address their direct issues that matter to their people. In the Pacific, again, it's climate change, it's illegal fishing, it's capacity building. That's how we've got to engage, not go in and say, look, we're going to counter China. That's not interesting to them.
Thank you, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Secretary, thank you so much for appearing before our committee today. In the last administration, the United States enacted financial sanctions and export controls against 24 PRC companies that helped Beijing advance its territorial claims in the South China Sea. So I would like to ask you, how many sanctions or export controls has this Biden administration used against PRC companies that is supporting either the military construction or harassment in these waters?
Yeah. So look, all told, you know, in a variety of arenas, the Biden administration has done, you know, somewhere between 800 and 900 sanctions against companies, against individuals on a very regular basis. I think we have continued the sanctions that have been put in place and added to them associated with some national security entities in China. I will say frankly, to be honest, Congresswoman, you know this because you've traveled in the region, the most important steps that we can take right now are capacity building in the Philippines and linking the Philippines with a larger group of
Talking
nations.
about Philippines, yes, thank you for raising that. I was at the Shangri-La dialogue, and I was attending there when I listened to President Marcos making presentation when he was asked about the red line question. President Marcos said the death of a Filipino citizen is very, very close to what we define as an act of war. Do you agree with that?
Look, I can't speak for President Marcos, a man that I admire greatly. I would simply say that our security partnership between the Philippines.
So we have a mutual defense treaty with the
Yes.
Philippines. So if a Filipino sailor was killed by a CCP, Coast Guard, water canyon, or deliberate ship ramming, would that invoke mutual defense treaty?
So we have signaled very directly, we've reassured the Philippines and signaled to the Chinese that our defense treaty does apply in circumstances on the high seas involving Philippine naval assets and sailors. I'm not going to get here and say, like, on this particular hypothetical. I would simply say you are exactly correct, Congresswoman, that the security treaty between the United States and the Philippines is very much active in
Thank you.
these complex scenarios.
So let me get to the next question about, I have a legislation called the PAID Act, Protecting American Innovation and Development Act. This is a tool to expose foreign adversaries who steal U.S. intellectual property related to critical national security technologies, because as you know, CCP steals up to $600 billion worth of U.S. intellectual property and trade secrets annually. So we need to use every tool available to stop this obvious theft and hold the CCP accountable. So when Fujian Jinhua stole U.S. intellectual property that was tied to semiconductor production, the BIS and the End User Review Committee put that on the entity list. So do you agree with that action, and what did that do?
So, look, I would simply say that I think the larger effort that you described to harden American companies, our governments, to intrusions and efforts to steal our industrial, commercial, technological secrets, that is a important order and incredibly vital to our own national security.
So do you believe that theft of national security-related intellectual property by a foreign adversary like PRC should be a basis for an entity listing?
I do.
Okay, thank you. In my travels in the Indo-Pacific, as you know, and also attending Shangri-La dialogue, having conversations with our counterparts at the governments there, and also with the U.S. defense startups, actively participating with Indo-PACOM, it's clear that the U.S. defense industrial base is strained, and we need to revive our shipbuilding industry. And even Indo-PACOM Admiral Paparo says, we're not ready if something happens. So we need to activate all of our bases all around. So strained defense industrial base does not send a clear deterrence signal to our adversaries. So can you tell me and our committee, how are you thinking through supporting our US partners and allies and our readiness in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. In truth, we downsized our military-industrial complex substantially in the 1990s, and we've really not taken the steps to diversify. We need more firms, we need more capacity, but in addition, to be honest, Congressman, we need to work more with allies and partners. We need to work towards co-production. We've seen both co-production, co-design arrangements between the United States and Japan, South Korea, and others. I think those are incredibly important. They're difficult to arrange. A lot of the procedural stuff that has already been discussed. Ultimately, we are going to need to step up our defense industrial base across the board. And we're in the midst of that, but it's not a short-term challenge. It's a longer-term challenge.
My time's up. I'd like to recognize Gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Manning, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Deputy Secretary Campbell, as you may know, in July, the State Department unveiled the global guidelines for countering anti-Semitism, a major commitment by more than 40 countries and international organizations to act against rising anti-Semitism around the globe and to implement best practices to protect the Jewish community. Just this week, Congressman Chris Smith and I introduced a bipartisan resolution supporting the global guidelines and calling on more countries to embrace them. I'm hopeful that the chairman and the ranking member will advance this resolution soon. And while I'm glad that Australia has endorsed the guidelines, more countries in the Indo-Pacific should now follow their lead in the fight against anti-Semitism. And sadly, we have learned that the existence of a large Jewish population in a country is not a prerequisite for anti-Semitism. So can we count on you to make sure that the chiefs of mission across the regional bureaus are working to implement these best practices and to adopt the guidelines?
Yes.
And let me suggest, I know Ambassador Lipstadt recently had a discussion about interfaith tolerance and anti-Semitism in Indonesia, so I would suggest that might be a place to pay attention to. And it would be helpful if you and other senior leaders at the department would raise this issue in your meetings at the UN General Assembly.
Thank you.
Thank you for that commitment. Moving to a different topic, I understand how important our relationship with India is, and yet last month, thousands of medical workers in India went on strike after the rape and murder of a young medical student. And this is reminiscent of another horrific case, the Delhi gang rape in 2012. How is the State Department monitoring the treatment of women in India, the most populous democracy, and engaging with the government at the highest levels to address this significant and recurring problem of sexual violence toward women?
So thank you, Congressman, for your initial views about the importance of combating anti-Semitism. I do just want to underscore we have very fulsome dialogue with our Indian partners on a range of issues, strategic issues, but we do not shy away from raising issues of concerns, whether it's domestic issues of treatment or extraterritorial activities that have raised concerns. I will say I find Indian partners, though, willing to have a dialogue and are attentive to issues that we raise.
Continuing focus on this horrific issue would be much appreciated. Last year, the Biden administration released an updated Women, Peace, and Security Strategy and National Action Plan aimed at increasing women's participation in peace and security efforts and protecting women and girls from conflicts, crises, and violence. In the Indo-Pacific, Japan in particular has been a real leader on WPS issues. So can you share more about how the department is working to advance this important agenda in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah. Thank you very much. And so this relates to the question that we heard earlier about, for instance, Papua New Guinea. They have particular challenges there in terms of violence against women. We've seen that in parts of the Pacific. We are deeply engaged in programming and engagement, not just with local communities, but with legal offices about appropriate steps to enact protections more generally. I would simply say that this arena of discussion, both on the role of women in society writ large, but also protections, has been very actively engaged across the Indo-Pacific. We see it in Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. Ironically, many of these countries have made enormous strides in integrating women into power structures that had previously been dominated almost exclusively by men.
I appreciate your focus on this issue. I want to turn quickly to Taiwan. We need to resolve the double taxation issue, which is holding back the U.S.-Taiwan economic relationship. The House has already passed legislation to fix this problem. How important is it that the Senate do the same?
I think it is extremely important that Taiwan have more clarity on the double taxation issue. I appreciated the legislation that the House has passed. I know that this is something that is under very active consideration in the executive branch. I will tell you my own personal view. It's something that we've got to get on top of and move forward on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope our Senate colleagues will move forward on this, and I encourage the administration to continue to drive this issue forward.
Thank
My
you.
time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you. I appreciate all your views.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. I now recognize the gentlelady from American Samoa, Representative Radiwagan.
Hello, for Secretary Campbell. It's good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well, ma'am.
As you know, I represent American Samoa, located thousands of miles from here in the South Pacific. And quite frankly, it's scary how active the PRC is in the Pacific Islands. They're developing infrastructure in the countries that surround my home district, independent Samoa, the Cook Islands, and Kiribati. In fact, to get to my home district, we have to fly through Kiribati airspace. The PLA is showing increasing interest in the Pacific Islands in recent years. Do you consider the Pacific Islands as a front line of strategic competition with the PRC?
Ma'am, I do think it is, but I will also say my own experience is that that's not the way to express it to Pacific Islanders. I think when you start that way, they have a tendency to tune out. They want to hear about direct issues that affect their daily lives. We talked about it. Climate change, illegal fishing, capacity building, health of the people. And so I think what we've tried to do is to compete in a smart way, Congresswoman, to engage, open more embassies, do more USAID. You know the Pacific. They love the Peace Corps, try to get the Peace Corps to go to more islands. So our strategy really is to step up our game in every element of societal engagement to show that we care about the Pacific. That's the best way to compete.
Not only do they love the Peace Corps, but the Coast Guard as well. Those are the two
I
things
was
they tell the
afraid I
United
was going to
States
get cut
all
off.
the time.
I was afraid I was going to get cut off, so I didn't mention everyone like the Coast Guard. Coast Guard is frankly our secret tool in the Pacific. They are magnificent. They do an incredible job. They are appreciated everywhere they go.
How much money is the Pacific Islands receiving from the counter $400 million counter PRC influence fund?
The specific amount from that $400 million,
Yes.
I'd have to, Congressman, I don't have that exact figure. I would generally say that as a basic matter, the Pacific has to fight for every dollar it gets. I find that a challenge. I'd like, if I could encourage, if this committee thinks that we need to do more for the Pacific, you got to direct funds more in that arena. We have to step up our game more. I would like us to have 3 or 4 new embassies in the next 3 or 4 years. I'd like more USAID. I'd like more DFC. I'd like more support for anti-drug. All of those initiatives are important. They don't fall directly in the counter, PRC, even though that's the larger impact. We are going to need more budget support if we're going to compete effectively in the Pacific.
So what progress has been made in the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness in the Quad?
So we've made, and look, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, Congresswoman, but we have some big announcements on Saturday, which will indicate that we've moved forward substantially on efforts that basically allow for the Pacific and Southeast Asia to track largely untracked to this point illegal fishing fleets that are the scourge of these extraordinarily important fishing areas. Vast majority of those fishing fleets are Chinese. We think these capacities will be indeed very helpful in helping local governments repel illegal fishing in their home waters.
PRC is a top trading partner for nearly every country in the Indo-Pacific region. And do you believe FTAs have a role in U.S. foreign policy in the Indo-Pacific? And why is this administration not pursuing any free trade agreements?
So, look, I don't think I need to tell this committee, like, trade is complicated on both sides. I will simply say this. We've got to get more innovative and figure out how to have more trade, commercial-related engagement with the Indo-Pacific. They look to us for open markets, for engagement. We're the largest investor. We play a very active role. Imports from these countries are all up, but more still needs to be done.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back.
Thank you.
The chair now recognizes Representative Amo from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Campbell, for being here today. This week, as has been noted in this hearing, we celebrated the third anniversary of one of the most important security agreements arrangements in generations, the Australia, United Kingdom, United States Security Pact, also known as AUKUS. Thanks to President Biden's work to strengthen this trilateral relationship, AUKUS is playing a critical role in maintaining security and stability in the Indo-Pacific. The domestic benefits are worth noting too. In my home state of Rhode Island, we are proud of our role in AUKUS defense production, ensuring mutual security and boosting our local economy through small businesses that provide good-paying jobs. We need a smooth and orderly process to transfer defense articles between our nations for AUKUS to effectively deter threats and maintain security. And Congress has previously created exemptions to our international traffic and arms regulations, or ITAR, to allow for easier transfer of information and weapons. And I know that there are concerns that the ITAR rule proposed by the State Department in August excludes critical technologies that our allies need. Technologies like engineering and capabilities of the Virginia-class submarine, which is produced in Rhode Island and is essential to fulfilling the promise of AUKUS. Mr. Deputy Secretary, how is the State Department working with our Australian and United Kingdom partners to ensure the rules allow AUKUS to be effective while still protecting sensitive technology?
So, look, thanks for the question, and we had some discussion, Congressman, a little earlier. First of all, I think we have to do everything possible to remove as many restrictions on any kind of military engagement with Great Britain and Australia. So that is the goal. That's the direction that we're going to have to move towards. It will take some time. The natural proclivity of many elements of our national security bureaucracy are to protect those secrets. That's understandable, but we've got to be clear that we're going to work with the Australians and the British. They have taken a number of steps to give us more assurance about their ability to protect those secrets. I will say that I think more needs to be done in terms of certain kinds of assurances. I will say those categories you give, it is not, just so you understand, it is not that those activities are prohibited. It is that the contracts themselves have to be reviewed. And so what Australians are worried about is that, and the British, that long reviews take a huge long period of time and they can delay. So I think the idea there was not so much to say an outright no, but certain capabilities, very sensitive capabilities, we would need to review as part of the process. Overall, I think we need to move more in the direction that you indicate, to expect that we are going to provide almost everything necessary for these countries to closely ally and partner. keep at it with us. We're working with you. I do think we've moved in the right direction. Very much appreciate the role that Chairman McCall has in pushing us forward on this.
And, the bipartisan cooperation here alongside the State Department is essential, and will continue to be supportive of moving as fast as possible. Very briefly, as I close here, I do, want to note the concerning increase in cooperation between Russia, China, and North Korea, and your words publicly that you believe that China is providing Russia with material to continue their illegal invasion of Ukraine, material support. In June, Vladimir Putin visited North Korea to sign a comprehensive strategic partnership that raised concerns about North Korea supplying Russia with munitions. Do we have any evidence that Russia is being provided lethal assistance in their war in Ukraine by China or North Korea? And what sorts of actions can the administration do to deter this cooperation?
So, look, we do see lots of indications of capabilities. Almost every weapon system that the Russians have utilized on the battlefield in their illegal war have component pieces of chips or other things that have come from foreign sources, many from China. We see signs of North Korean weapon systems, artillery rounds, longer range missiles that are collected on the battlefields of Ukraine. So there are clear evidence on both cases. North Korea is about the most heavily sanctioned country in the world. We've still added on a few sanctions as a result, and I've indicated in previous questions the steps that we've taken against Chinese firms that have been directly involved in certain capabilities that we believe are deeply antithetical. Ultimately, for this to be effective, we need more Europeans to stand up and say these steps that China are taking on the battlefield in our homeland in Europe are unacceptable to a relationship that is positive with Beijing. They can't have it both ways. They can't help to prosecute this war and expect business as normal, as usual, with Europe.
Well, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you.
The chair now recognizes myself, Jim Moylan from Guam. Deputy Secretary, thank you for your testimony and coming before us today. And I want to put our attention to the Philippines. Now, President Marcos said the death of a Filipino citizen will be very, very close to what we defined as an act of war. Do you agree with that, Deputy Secretary?
So what I do agree with is that our security treaty with the Philippines is strong. It applies to circumstances that we are now engaged on in the arena around Second Thomas Shoal and elsewhere in the South China Sea. I think we've taken, direct steps to bolster our relationship, and the elements of the security treaty speak for themselves. I think the Filipinos are very confident that we're standing with them, and frankly, I leave to the President Marcos on determinations, but I would simply say everything we've heard from him and his government is that he feels a great confidence working closely with us.
All right, we have House Resolution 837, and a resolution I've led with Rep. Scott of Virginia, and it seeks to reaffirm our mutual defense treaty with the Philippines. And if a Filipino sailor was killed by a Chinese Coast Guard by water cannon, which we see happening, or a deliberate ship ramming, which we see again happening, would that invoke our mutual defense treaty?
Yeah. So look, Congressman, you will understand that if I'm stating clearly how important our security treaty is, that matters enormously. We are normally expected in these circumstances to avoid discussing hypotheticals when we're not exactly sure the context. I do want to assure you and anyone watching that our security treaty with the Philippines is ironclad, and we will continue to build on our strong partnership with the Philippines. There should just be no question about that.
I agree with the no questions about that. I think that's very clear, but what we want to make clear is that there is no hesitation in invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty, and that we take action, and that President Marcos is very clear on as any death of a Filipino citizen would be very, very close to what's defined as an act of war.
Yeah.
And that's what we're prepared to do. But of course, diplomatically, we want to make sure it's done properly. I just want to ensure the stressfulness and things to happen quickly in support.
Thank you. I think I register that view. I understand the strong people-to-people ties between the United States and the Philippines. This body reflects more than any other the sense that we need to stand resolutely with our partners in the Philippines. And we take that on board. We take it seriously. It's a matter of enormous national import.
Thank you for that. Just quickly now, changing channels a bit. In June of this year, the government of Palau accused Beijing of launching a cyber attack on its network. How can the U.S. enhance cybersecurity cooperation with Indo-Pacific allies to defend against state-sponsored cyber attacks, cyber espionage, and other digital threats?
Thank you so much for this. I would simply say that Palau, under President Whips, has been a very strong partner of the United States. It is essential that we stand with them in so many different ways. Next week, there will be a formal signing of the COFA arrangement. We do this every 20 years or so. This is a big deal. Palau has gotten substantial new capacities through these arrangements. We have a major set of work undergoing with Palau on resilience of their capacities, both internet, resisting disinformation campaigns. Almost every area imaginable, we're working closely with Palau, who is, frankly, a tremendous partner of the United States.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
And that concludes my questioning. The chair now recognizes Representative Weil. You're now recognized. All right, the chair now recognizes Representative Statton of Arizona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Our Bipartisan CHIPS Act made historic investments in the production of American-made semiconductors. Investments in my home state of Arizona is benefiting tremendously from that bill. The CHIPS Act also took steps to address supply chain vulnerabilities created by decades of offshoring. It was a good start, but there is so much more work that this Congress can and must do to diversify our semiconductor supply chain and protect our national security. In this effort, the U.S. Development Finance Corporation is an essential tool. When this committee advanced a reauthorization of the DFC earlier this summer, we made two very important updates, expanding the range of countries where the DFC can invest and including a sense of Congress that the DFC should respond to the current topics of national economic and foreign policy concern, including semiconductor supply chains and critical mineral security. While the reauthorization legislation awaits a full vote, the DFC is already making moves that align with these principles. The DFC and the Taiwan International Cooperation and Development Fund recently agreed to expand their partnership in the Indo-Pacific, particularly on projects related to infrastructure, information technology, energy, and more. So Deputy Secretary Campbell, how is the State Department working with the DFC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, USAID, and other agencies to maximize U.S. development and economic investments in the Indo-Pacific region to offer credible alternatives to China?
So first of all, let me just associate myself with everything you've said.
Thank you.
The DFC is our most important development tool. It should be diversified. I have to tell you, I don't think people understand when we go up against the Belt and Road, we have to have something in our holster. The DFC has done remarkable work, which it has not gotten enough credit for. And to allow it to work more in technology is, I think, one of the most important innovations that this committee has suggested. I chaired the DFC board last week. I'm pleased to tell you that the total amount of deals they signed last year is greater than what China did through Belt and Road.
That's
Do
great.
you understand that?
That's
So that means we are actually in the game. We just don't make enough publicity about it. We don't underscore it enough. What you guys are seeking to do here is exactly the right thing and allows us to compete directly. We have to be able to compete in more countries and in more arenas like technology. So bless you for doing this, and I support it completely.
That's great. If we want to win the long-term competition with China, we need to make sure that the U.S. maintains our edge in critical technologies like semiconductors. And it's imperative that we prevent American innovations from being used to advance the CCP's malign and geopolitical goals. The Biden administration has imposed extensive controls against China in the semiconductor and the advanced computing spheres to protect U.S. national security. In just over 3 years, the Department of Commerce has added more than 1,200 entities to the entity list, 300 of them from China. In this effort, coordination among allies and partners is imperative. While Japan and the Netherlands recently adopted some complementary export controls, most of the actions have been unilateral on the part of the United States. What is the administration doing to ensure that any new export controls placed on China are not done alone, but in concert with critical partners in those sectors?
Thanks, Congressman. So I will just say that we have deep consultations underway with key technology partners. I will tell you, one of the things that we've learned in this process is that many countries will join with us in an agenda to restrict the flow of certain capabilities, but they have to believe that we will also support them in investments and sharing of information. So what we've sought to do with allies in both Europe and the Indo-Pacific is to strike that balance, right? None of these countries want every bit of innovation done in the United States. They want to know that we can work together more collaboratively. And I think in that context, they are then prepared to take the necessary steps to restrict certain technology flows, both manufacturing and ultimate use, into the PRC. I would say, generally speaking, like there's lots of stuff we could point to that have been hard. And this is generally a pretty good news story. And I will tell you, it has been felt in Beijing. We just need to continue it as we go forward and have folks understand that, yes, military issues are important. This technology area is the high ground, which we must keep, we must invest, we must understand and implement, not just domestically, but with allies and partners.
I appreciate that very much. You've addressed fentanyl previously. We're going to talk about it again. Last year, the U.S. and China launched the U.S. PRC Counter-Narcotics Working Group to drive ongoing coordination to tackle and stop the production, financing, and distribution of illicit drugs. What concrete steps has Beijing taken since November to live up to the agreements made as part of the working group?
Thanks. We answered a little bit of that earlier, Congressman. I would just say they have taken a few modest steps. They have arrested some individuals. They've raided some premises. They've shut some companies down. I would simply say that I think those are modest steps. That much more needs to be done. Many of these groups operate kind of nefariously behind the scenes, hard to track even for a country like China. They appear to be committed to it. The reason they're so focused on it, frankly, is that it's not just the voice of the executive branch. The American people, expressed through this body and others, have gotten the attention of China, and I think they're determined to take some steps at least. It is also the case that drugs are not just hitting the United States, China's own population, other parts of the world, and so this is an issue that the Chinese have to deal with diplomatically. They would, I think, appreciate not having to hear about this at every encounter, which they do now.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Representative Huizinga from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Deputy Secretary Campbell, we recently passed some legislation, which happened to be my bill. It was in July. Committee passed H.R. 8892, the Missile Technology Control Revision Act, which would give the administration the flexibility to exempt certain MT items under AUKUS while ensuring non-proliferation commitments made to other signatories of the MTCR. Do you support this legislation?
I do.
You do, okay. There seems to be some holdups, though, with this, and I need you to help explain this. The new AUKUS ITAR exemption contains a lengthy excluded technology list for items that are not eligible for license-free transfer. The ETL covers 30% of all defense export licenses between the U.S., U.K., and Australia, and includes items crucial for the timely delivery of AUKUS Pillar 1 and 2 technologies. The broad ETL defies congressional intent, in my opinion, and will constrain future collaboration on cutting-edge defense technologies. If we can't trust these allies, I'm not sure who we can trust. So with these overwhelming majority of the licenses captured by the ETL relate to the missile technology, why are we having this holdup? What is State Department's plan to move these MT items from, or to remove those MT items from the ETL?
So first of all, let me just say there's hardly a word that you said that I would disagree with. There are
Curious on the ones that you would.
Well, no, I think
Because that might be where the holdup is.
I would agree, and I'd associate myself with with everything you said, actually. And there are very few countries that we can trust as much as Great Britain and Australia. If we're going to give them our most coveted technology, nuclear weapons, nuclear propulsion capability, then we should be able to work with them in these other arenas as well. So
why the holdup?
So look, first of all, the direction of travel has been more and more things are being released. The particular areas that you mentioned, as I tried to respond here, these are not areas that are absolutely excluded. It means that they have to be reviewed by the U.S. government before they are transferred.
Whom specifically?
It is a group of a variety of different agencies, including the State Department, DOD, others as well.
But this is outside of any CFIUS review.
No, I understand that. What I'm simply saying is I do believe that we should move to allow as much sharing of technology as possible. I made that very point clear to the chairman. I do believe we have more work to be done on this. It takes time. The dominant responsibility of folks at the Pentagon and the State Department in almost every arena here is to restrict, for good reasons, of those technologies.
Sure.
So it is not a natural.
Let me refine my question then.
Yeah.
Where do you believe the holdup, hesitation, whatever word you want to use, that is causing the delay? Where is that located? Where is that clog in the pipe?
So look, I would simply say that in some parts of our government, there is a philosophical question. Some areas, there would be people that would argue we need to maintain and retain national advantage on certain absolutely key technology.
But that's the unique thing about our Constitution. It's not their choice. It's a legislative choice that Congress puts forward.
Yeah, I think the point that the chairman made is that he believes that our implementation or the implementation to date of the executive branch has not been consistent with what he wants to see more of. And I made a commitment directly to him, a direction that I believe in, by the way, that we need to do more here. And I'm going to take that back.
And you'll make that same commitment that you'll work specifically on this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I would also just tell you, just so you know, Congressman, I was there at the creation of this. I believe in it deeply. I think it is the most important step that we could possibly take with allies and partners.
Right.
And we cannot put obstacles in its path that would curtail its success. So I'm completely with you.
My time is running out. I'm going to try to consolidate this in. I'll give you the question, and then I think you'll know where we're headed. My question is how does the administration plan to coordinate with the UK and Australia to remove the items from ETL?
So I think that what actually helps enormously are hearings like this. We have a ongoing process with key actors in the Pentagon and the State Department. I believe there is growing alignment. We still have more time to be able to move in this direction. I will just simply tell you, it may seem easy, Congressman, for many of these folks, it is an unnatural act, right? So they've been husbanding.
Gentleman's time has expired.
All right.
Yeah, yield back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now recognize. Oh, sorry. Representative Campbell Dove from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Campbell, for being here today. You are here. This just happened yesterday, so I have to ask. Yesterday's operation against the Hezbollah pagers involved a Taiwanese product. So based on your intel, did Taiwan have any involvement in or knowledge of this operation?
So first of all, this is, as you said, just happened. I can say just a couple of things quickly. Secretary Blinken in the Middle East this morning indicated that we had no foreknowledge of this and were not involved in this in any way. I have seen statements from the Taiwan manufacturer that they had no role in this. I think there are probably more, revelations to come. I'm just providing you the information that I have to date.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record. So a top priority for the Pacific Island nations, which should be a priority for us given our relationship with them, is adapting to the adverse effects of a climate crisis that affects national security and also people's livelihoods. So how is the United States supporting the Pacific Islands in ramping up their adaptation and mitigation efforts, including greater U.S. contributions to the Pacific Resilience Facility?
Yeah, I really thank you for this question, and it's something that I'm deeply committed to. The ultimate commitments that the Pacific Islanders want are reductions in CO2, and I think the United States has led the way here. A number of programs are underway, and you'd think that these are mostly about hardening facilities, but in fact, the strategies are multifaceted. Turns out that in many places, the actual density of mangroves has a huge potential in helping with erosion and dealing with storm surge. We've worked with clean water technologies as more and more of the aquifers have become, more contaminated with salinated water. We've worked on a variety of innovative efforts at construction of critical facilities. We have provided new means of internet connectivity with many of these islands. As you probably know, Congresswoman, and if they're hit, they sometimes are without internet capacity for months, leaving them cut off. So the multifaceted strands that we're trying to take would yield in greater resiliencies for all of these islands. I do want to just say, though, I think the fact of the matter is the increase in storm intensities, the rising seawater levels, particularly for coral islands, coral atoll islands, is just an enormous challenge. And we just have to recognize that. And the only way forward is to work more constructively with allies and partners. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Thank you. We also have to recognize that climate change is real. So away from the headlines, North Korea has ramped up its nuclear provocations, including releasing images of a uranium enrichment facility and testing ballistic missiles twice in the past week. How does greater DPRK cooperation with Russia impact North Korea's calculations regarding its ability to escalate tensions?
Another great question. Frankly, we worry about that partnership between the DPRK and Russia. It may embolden them to take more provocative steps. All I can tell you that the best answer to that is deeper trilateral engagement between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. We have undertaken that. Also, we've undertaken steps to make clear that our extended deterrence is strong, it's durable, and evolving to make clear that we will not accept any kind of threat to the ROK and the people living on the peninsula. So I think the steps of deterrence, of forward deployment, of engagement, working with allies and partners, that message of determination is unmistakable in Pyongyang.
Great, thank you. And I just want to say I applaud the Biden administration for knowing that climate change is real. In my last few seconds, we've talked about development being key. We've talked about defense being key. diplomacy is also really important, and would like to know in the remaining seconds how we're competing against China in the soft power arena of diplomacy and educational exchange.
Yeah. So first of all, educational exchange is critical. Every program, at least I'm involved with, I want a people-to-people element to it. We've got to connect our peoples. The Quad Fellowship, we're going to do more about that this week, and thrilled that we're being able to bring more Pacific Islanders to universities in the United States. So I can't agree with you more. And then on the diplomatic front, got to show up. And by the way, if I can just say, that's not just us, that's you guys as well. I'd love to see a delegation of this committee go to the Pacific Islands. It will matter to them more than you realize.
Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
With that, we recognize Mr. Baird from Indiana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Deputy Secretary, thank you for being here. My question deals with the, the PRC is such a formidable trading partner in nearly every country in the Indo-Pacific. And I just wanted to get your perspective on the free trade agreements, and do they have a role in foreign policy in the Indo-Pacific? And why is this administration not pursuing some of those free trade agreements?
So look, Congressman, it's a great point. I think, as in my opening statement, I said it's going to be important in the next iteration. We've got to find a bipartisan way to signal that we want to engage in an open and optimistic way, commercially, technologically, with not only the Pacific, but particularly the dominant nations of the Indo-Pacific. They still are disappointed on us for not moving ahead with TPP. We're not gonna revisit that. That's behind the way. But now going forward, we've got to do more. I will say many of the economic and commercial indicators are positive. Exports are up. We're the largest investor in Asia. I think we are supporting initiatives so that American workers get the benefit of this engagement with the Indo-Pacific. But I would simply say that I think finding innovative ways to connect the United States commercially and economically with the Indo-Pacific should be at the top of the list.
I appreciate your thoughts in that vein, because my background's agriculture, and that China presents kind of a double-edged sword in a way, because we export a lot of agricultural commodities, but at the same time, with their trying to take over the world leadership, it's a concern to us. So we want to make sure that we continue to be cognizant of that situation and our relationship and how we deal with China and the Indo-Pacific, because the Indo-Pacific also represents opportunities for other agricultural commodities or our commodities. And so,
yeah, totally agree. Look, ultimately, I think it means diversifying markets. I'll note that many of the agricultural states in the United States who had only one or two markets in Asia are now diversifying, more in India, more in Southeast Asia more generally. I support that. But I also think unexceptional trade between the United States and China should continue. I think it's in the best interest to have trade links that do not compromise our national security. I think that's stabilizing. And so I support your farmers in your district, sir, being able to sell their stuff to China. It just makes sense.
I appreciate that. I've said many times, and of course, my biases are probably showing through, but our farmers and ranchers have the ability to produce tremendous quality products. And then we have the logistic capability to make sure we can get them anywhere in the world. And I think that ought to be a part of our negotiation process. But moving on to another area here, we've got about 1:30. What strategy should the U.S. employ to counter the influence of China's tech giants like Huawei? And if you've already talked about that, but Huawei in the region 5G infrastructure and ensure telecommunication networks. And do you support the sale and transfer of any good or service to Huawei, ZTE, or any other PRC 5G company?
Yeah,
and it's my concern too that a lot of times you can have embedded in some of that technology avenues to get back to China. So that's my question.
Yeah, look, Congressman, we're worried about that. We talk about that a lot to our allies and partners, that there are hidden back doors in some of this technology that are antithetical to our interests. And so, in truth, we have to compete technologically. And in some cases, it's really choosing which system you're going to associate yourself with. I do want to just underscore that China's gains in the global south in technology, in the information spaces, is real. And frankly, we again, this is another area where we have to step up our game. At the core, though, it means that dominant technologies, we must maintain a cutting edge. And I think through the support of this committee and others, we've done that in 5G, in semiconductors, and in particularly AI, which is going to be very important going forward.
So thank you. And I just have to add to your database, Purdue University has just started a program to train undergraduates and graduate students in the manufacture of chips. And so that's bringing that back on shore. So I want you to know that.
That's good on Purdue. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
With that, I recognize myself for 5 minutes. And we'll start on a topic you just mentioned with a colleague from the other side of the aisle. You talked about sea levels and islands and stuff like that. Yeah. How much has the sea level risen in the last 50 years?
Congressman, where are you talking about? Like
you talk about the sea levels and islands and the threat of climate change. How much has the sea level raised in the last 50 years?
You know, and I'm
approximately.
No, I understand. I'm not a geographical engineer.
Okay, but you brought it up, so I'm just asking you questions.
So
if you don't know, just say I don't know.
Well, I don't know particularly, but I have.
Okay, that's okay.
I've been to those islands, and many of the areas that were.
Have you ever read the book Unsettled by Koonin?
Before are now.
Excuse me, I reclaim my time. Have you ever read the book Unsettled by Koonin?
What book?
Unsettled?
I don't think I've
read it. It's a scientific book written by a Democrat physicist who is on the climate change board for Obama. There's not too many other books written about it, so I suggest when you talk about climate change that we're all educated on the topic. I get tired of people saying we need to recognize, of course we recognize there's climate change. The question is, what is the science behind that? And I want to address it specifically because I'm tired of people using it as a weapon to justify bad spending. I want to have scientific explanations. I want to have a real conversation, not a religion, but a scientific conversation. Has the carbon dioxide level ever been higher in Earth than it is right now?
I'm saying.
Has the carbon dioxide level ever been higher in the Earth's atmosphere than it is now?
I'm sure there are periods.
It has. Okay. Has the sea level ever been higher than it is right now?
Yes.
Of course it has. Way higher. Have we had climate change in the past? Of course we have. Is it on a 100,000 or a 40,000 year cycle? Of course it is. Rapid heating with slow cooling. Are we accelerating the process? Probably. Do you know how much if we cut all of our carbon emissions in America from all of our vehicles, all of our ships, all of our planes, all of our trains, tomorrow, how much would it change the sea levels in the next 50 years, 100 years? Do you have any idea? Of course you don't. It's unsettled because it would make up the difference of 0.000167% of the atmosphere. It's negligible. Let's have a real scientific conversation to begin with. That's what I just want to have. I just want to have a scientific conversation instead of this idea that we, the United States, are the evil empire that's polluting this earth and making the climate change when there's other planets in this solar system that are having exactly the same heating, and they don't have humans. Let's have a scientific conversation. That's a Senate paper, by the way, based on a scientific science, and it's not me making up stuff. It's bipartisan. Let's have a scientific conversation, please. With that said, Tegan Gambarian, are you familiar with him?
The
hostage in Nigeria. I'm going to call him a hostage because he was arrested after being lured there based on basically representing an organization, Binance. He's a guy who used to work for the IRS, has prosecuted a case, a super honest guy, a constituent of mine. He's being treated totally unfairly. He hasn't been given the rights that they guarantee him by their own constitution, by their own laws. He has problems getting access to a lawyer, problem access to his health care. My question is this. Based on the establishment of the Levinson Act, he meets at least 7 of 11 points to determine wrongful detainment. Why is the State Department leadership not elevating Tigran's case to the Office of the Special Presidency Envoy for Hostage Affairs? Now, I've asked this several times to several people. Nobody can give me an answer when he meets the criteria.
So let me say it's a subject of real concern. I personally, on my trip to Nigeria, raised it with the leadership, and we very much want to get it resolved. And I think it is a subject of real concern, so I agree with you. As you know, their government has concerns about Binance, so do we.
But why isn't this getting elevated? He meets the criteria.
Well, it's been elevated in attention in the U.S. government. I think we've tried to address it. We're going to continue until we get a resolution.
Everybody gives me the same answer. In other words, they don't know because he meets the criteria, but it has not been elevated to the Office of the Special Presidency Envoy for Hostage Affairs, which would help him. I want to help him. You want to help him. Everybody says they're concerned, but nobody wants to do what they can do to help him, which is that next step. I think we should be pressing for that. That's what I'm doing right now with you, in front of everybody, just so we know. Last point, and I only have a few seconds to do this, but basically, Secretary Blinken and yourself reported that China's massive trade in dual-use technologies has made machine tools and semiconductors that reconstitutes Russia's defense capabilities. Given this, many of these technologies are subject to U.S. export laws if destined for Russia or Belarus. Why has the administration not imposed significant consequences like sanctions on Chinese banks and firms that are doing exactly that? And by the way, if the president lacks insufficient authority, I'd urge you to take a look at my bill, H.R. 8361, the Economic Espionage Prevention Act, which the House passed last week, and work with me to get it signed into law so he has the teeth to take care of this very important strategic issue.
Look, I share your concerns about what we're seeing between China and Russia. I talked to extensively, Congressman, earlier about the worries about their support for the defense industrial base. We have targeted a large number of their firms. We've put many of their financial institutions on watch. The reason that I was in Europe last week, for this to be effective, needs to be multifaceted. We've got to have Europeans with us. I think we're beginning to make headway, but I must say, I take back what you've just mentioned. I think the indication from this committee is an expectation that we do more.
And it's not about concern, it's about action. Let's do it. Let's stop being concerned and let's start getting things done. That's what we're here for. Thank you. With that, I yield. And I recognize my relief, Mr. Isaac from California.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll recognize myself. The good news is I'm the last. The other news is I've got a new subtopic, one that apparently somehow wasn't covered. We appreciate your being here, by the way, and we appreciate the fact that there is sufficient interest both in the White House and now at the State Department on China's actions. And you've been given some tough questions. This one is a little more public, and I want to make sure that it's in for the record. Last week, the Washington Post released an article identifying by name 6 PRC diplomats who literally paid for, assisted, and provided for dissidents to be violently assaulted. The same morning, the Justice Department unsealed charges against Linda Sun, which implicated the China's Consul General in New York. I understand that you don't have the ability to arrest diplomats, but we have the absolute authority and responsibility to expel diplomats. To your knowledge, is the Consul General still in the United States?
So my understanding is the Consul General that was in the process of transitioning out of the United States. And I believe that he has left as of last week, but I don't have final.
Social media yesterday says that's not true.
So again, he has
But
relieved.
here's my question, and it's a question that goes straight to Foggy Bottom. Did you, being the State Department, make him persona non grata and order him out? Or are you waiting for him to happen to leave on his own?
We have not taken those steps yet,
So,
Congressman, no.
so when you have American citizens being beaten, when the Washington Post has to bring out those names, when the Department of Justice, after a prolonged period of time, finally unseals an indictment, All of that is long after you at the State Department knew that he was the coordinator of it, and yet he is still in the country as of yesterday. Do you see why that might frustrate those of us who want to take seriously your ability to take unilateral steps appropriate under international law and appropriate under international tradition?
I will say I too was concerned by some of the reporting in the Washington Post about activities that were undertaken against peaceful protesters in San Francisco and elsewhere. My understanding,
But you were not surprised. The State Department, Department of Justice knew about it before the Washington Post got it leaked.
No, I would say actually elements of that story I don't think were widely known, Congressman, and I think it is fair to say that there are several of these elements that have come to light that are under review now.
During the last days of the previous administration, Iran was exporting about 160 to 180,000 barrels a day. They are now approaching 2 million barrels a day. Russia has been sanctioned, but similarly has increased their exports back to a full amount of their production. In other words, nothing is being held back. These are, again, areas in which China is, along with India, are purchasers. And the question I have for you is, what are you doing and what should we help you do to effect those sanctions? Because today those sanctions are moot. The idea that there's sanctions on China, on Russia, or on Iran, including the ones that lead to direct support against the people of Ukraine and perhaps would have a disastrous effect on Taiwan's future, they're not in place. Effectively, during the last 3.5 years, we have undone any effective sanctions because the most effective sanction is not swift financial transfers, it's the oil that we sought to stop.
Look, Congressman, I will say that there have been very substantial sanctions, further sanctions taken against Iran. I think we both know that. I take very seriously your point.
But is Iran a nation? Is Russia a nation? Or like the late John McCain said, they're gas stations impersonating nations. I know, John had a way. These are countries that are completely dependent on the export of minerals, particularly oil and natural gas. That is the only sanction that actually works against the ability for Russia or Iran to buy what they need.
Yeah, I think I understand this clearly. It's been discussed extensively. I promise I will take this back more directly. I will say, I don't think there are any questions that we view Iran as acting in almost every arena in ways that are antithetical to our interests, and we contest them in many ways, in many vehicles. Energy policy, I think you probably know there are lots of complexities associated with that, global markets, worries about what impacts it has in the United States. However, I do actually believe that the points, Congressman, that you raise are legitimate and require further exploration. Yes.
Well, in closing, although it's kind of nice to be last, they're going to be very patient if you will be. If the goal is to get the CCP to be a responsible stakeholder, the questions I brought up, for which the answers seem to be so far lacking, aren't we failing to hold the CCP accountable if we allow them to get the oil and natural gas they want and need? As a matter of fact, over 50 million barrels of excess oil went into their strategic petroleum reserves in the last 2 quarters. So they were able to buy what they needed, plus more than they needed, and they finally cut back now that they've filled those reserves. And we've seen the cabal, or the coalition of Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China effectively thwart our NATO allies' ability to maintain and to end the Ukraine conflict. So I'm going to close by saying, if we cannot reverse those trends, is it fair to say that we have not moved forward to actually make the CCP have any reason to be a responsible actor?
So, look, I don't want to close on a negative note, Congressman. I really appreciated this. I would simply say...
Well, you can close on a positive note that you've been an amazingly candid and honest testimony, and I appreciate that.
I would say my own counsel would be that I think what we are actually seeking to do is to build capacity and partnership to sustain the operating system among a number of states that are like-minded. I do not believe we've been very successful in any endeavor in trying to ultimately shape the direction, the thinking, the national identity of a country as complex as China. So I think we have to be careful in what we think we're doing. I'm primarily focused now on working on this combined group of countries that believe that what we've built can and should be sustained. So my primary focus is really working on perfecting this grouping of nations and adding to it, then believing that you're going to have an ability to shape the governance and the path of a country that has its own history, its own areas of focus. And so I think the points that you make, however, about the energy flows are important. I'm going to take those back. I hear you very clearly. I've been in other sessions where this has been raised. I do want to say I don't think there are any illusions about what we're seeing, the activities of Russia and China together, of North Korea, of Iran, occasionally Pakistan, this growing group of countries taking steps that are antithetical to our interests. We have to be deeply vigilant towards and adopt strategies to address. I'm completely for that. I think that's the right direction. I do believe that there's largely a bipartisan commitment to doing that, and that there are more steps that unite than divide us.
On that, you're absolutely correct that it is bipartisan and bicameral. I want to make the record complete with one last thing that is a little off subject, but it's important, I think, very important to the work you do. Over this last year, China-backed companies have defaulted on more than $1 trillion worth of real estate-related loans. And when I say defaulted, they're in most cases in U.S. Chapter 11. It's been not terribly well reported, although it is reported. I watch CNBC every morning, and they in passing mention it. The other day, they even mentioned that what used to be called the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, or the HSBC now, found themselves with a guarantee from the Chinese government being reneged on. So they now are in a situation where they're on the hook and they're having to make write-downs. Would you say, and I think we've got one more person to be recognized now, would you say that in fact the fragileness of the Chinese economy has not yet been fully understood by people here on the dais or people around the world, and that could be one of your leverages to changing the CCP's direction?
Congressman, it's a great point, and you are right to highlight the challenges that they've had in real estate and property more generally in the larger cities. They are facing issues with respect to aging population. Their financial system is showing some areas of strain. I would simply say my own counsel is that China's a very big country. It's difficult to say whether it's surging ahead or showing signs of weakness or both. I'm kind of in the both camp. I think we are at risk of veering between one of two extremes. Either they're 10 feet tall or they're collapsing before our eyes. I think the reality is that China is going to be formidable. It has the capacity to continue on. I think U.S. national strategy has to take that fully into account, neither exaggerating or diminishing the challenges that they present.
Secretary, you've been very kind, and I would agree with you on that point, that large trees, when they fall, very large trees, take down a lot of other trees with them, and we have to be aware of that with the Chinese economy. And with that, I recognize Congresswoman Titlis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Congressman Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was here earlier and had to run to T&I, but I appreciate you staying one more minute. You know, we've heard a lot about diplomacy, and we can talk about it from now till Christmas, but the point is, if you don't have the funding, you can't do it. And if you look at the House Republicans' recent funding bill that was pretty extreme for state foreign operations and related programs, it cut those budgets 12% beyond last year, 2024 levels. So I would ask you how these budget cuts constrain the State Department's ability to engage in great power competition. You're the expert on this. And what will be the impact of these cuts on our ability to compete for influence with China in the Indo-Pacific, which is what we've been talking about we need to do?
So, look, I appreciate coming up. I actually do think there's a lot of bipartisanship. I feel like folks are good to us, then we get back and our budgets are just destroyed. I think that there is a view somehow that the only thing that matters are our military budgets. Just nothing could be more wrong.
That's right.
We need more hope in technology. We need more focus on USAID. We need more focus on the State Department. I believe that's money well spent. I'm not in the business of procuring. I do think it puts us at a substantial advantage. I will tell you, we were talking about the Pacific. I'd landed in one of these island nations. We're driving along. Our embassy is a ramshackle place. The Chinese big tower, lots of stuff that they built. I understand that sometimes we got to get by with our know-how and our capability, but I do think we need to be able to do more as a nation diplomatically. And I hope that one of the things coming out of this upcoming election is a commitment to do so.
Well, and it's not just in the Indo-Pacific. We've
Yes,
seen
I
how
know.
many embassies that do not have ambassadors approved in Africa, where you also see China having a great deal of influence. And, you know, we've announced some new embassies in some of the Pacific Islands. I think Tonga is one. How are we going to stand these embassies up and have them have any credibility if we don't have the funding to give them the resources that they need?
Look, I'm with you on this, and, you know, the effort to try to stand up stuff in the Pacific has the feel of like scouting around the house for loose change. I would like to have more, but I understand that it's challenged, that it involves a lot of challenging issues. I do worry about like our ambassadors having trouble. I think what has been most concerning to me, I can understand why Congress might want to come at like a political person. We have to be prepared for this. We have to be able to step into the arena. The vast majority of people that are being held up now are career professionals. I don't think they really understand it. That's not what they signed up for. And the backlog, we're up in the, you know, many dozens of people waiting years. It's just not the right way to do business. It makes us look weak, and it's harder to make the case that these are areas where there's strong bipartisan support. So I'd love it if we could get through that stuff. There's always people tell you reasons why, but when you travel and when you're out of the country and you're engaging your partners, they ask you questions about stuff like that. It's hard to answer.
Absolutely, and you can't go into battle with one hand tied behind your back. I mean, if you want,
I've done it many times.
If you want to compete, you got to have the resources to compete, and certainly that's what we need to be doing, as we have heard from everybody with China. Well, thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you.
I thank the gentlelady, and as someone who sat for 3 years waiting to be confirmed in the Senate, I'm well aware of what that body sometimes does to perfectly good nominations. Of course, Bob Menendez is gone now, so it could be different. And with that, Mr. Secretary, I really appreciate your candor and your honesty and your being as forthcoming as any witness we have. I couldn't answer some of those questions on the environmental situation either, but I do recognize that these are always issues that come up globally, and I appreciate your answering them as best you could. Members will have additional questions, and I would ask, would you be able to, if you receive them within 5 days, to respond to them in writing?
Absolutely, I commit to do so.
Thank you. I appreciate that a great deal. Pursuant to House rules, then, members will have 5 days to submit those questions and their statements and any other extraneous material subject to the length limitation. And with that, you are relieved, sir.
Thank you, Congressman Isaac.